thank you all so much for joining us here this morning. Today, we're taking a trip to Scotland and we're finding the underwater, how am I pronouncing this, Ken? Is it gannet?
Yes, that's correct.
Gannet. All right, so finding the underwater gannet in the Shetland Islands, excuse me. Follow Ken Carlson's journey to the Shetland Islands in Scotland as he searched for a way to photograph the graceful Northern Gannet seabird diving underwater to fish. Not being a scuba diver made this a challenge, but Carlson finds a way after following up on a clue. So Ken is a nature, landscape, and fine art photographer living in Harrington, Maine, after living and practicing veterinary medicine in Ipswich for 43 years. He is a presenter, judge, educator, and traveler. He has traveled to more than 40 locations for his photography, including 4 trips to Scotland and 2 to the Shetlands. Again, want to thank, hopefully I pronounced most of that correctly, want to thank the Corning Foundation and the Friends of the Library once again. So all 130 of us who are watching live and the many more that will watch on demand, let's give Ken a big virtual round of applause for a wonderful presentation. And Ken, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Robert. And just to tell you, we've got a little bit of a technical problem. So the first couple of slides, you're going to see my notes over on the right-hand side, and then we'll get rid of that after that. And that was a technical glitch that we weren't able to overcome in the time we've had. But thank you, Robert. I really appreciate your invitation in the Tewksbury Library. And as you people all can read on the right-hand side, my friend Jack Holmes, who's been a presenter here on this this series a number of times, and a fellow member of the Greater Lynn Photographic Society for recommending me to Robert. So for me, this is, just got to start right off, this is really something different for me. I've made a lot of presentations to live audiences, say, you know, the 100, 125 people sort of thing. I've made presentations to a small number of Zoom, like 10 people on a Zoom call. I've never had a situation where I've had this number of people on a Zoom call where I can't see you and I get 0 audience feedback. And I can tell you that I feed off audience feedback, and I change my presentation, and now I don't know what to do. So this is going to be sort of an adventure for me, and hopefully it goes well, and hopefully people are all entertained for a little bit. Again, in the introduction over here, you know, you can see on the right, there's a number of things that he's already covered, so we really don't need to go into a lot of it. But I am doing now more fine art photography, primarily black and white, concentrating on creating portfolios or collections in order to tell a story or to make a point or whatever. And I do a lot of what's referred to as meaningful images. And I won't go into that. That's sort of a long story. I've done 7 self-published books. My latest project that I just finished here a couple of months ago, we have this 19th century Fort Knox. It's on the Penobscot River. And I did a book on that based on the concept of stopping to see, in quotes. And that idea was that a lot of times we go to a place, or we're in an environment or whatever, and there's a lot of things that we don't train ourselves to see because of our busy life. And this was taking something that's fairly common. You know, a lot of people go there, but a lot of the things that they didn't see, and how to see differently. And my definition of see is that I see with my eyes, I see with my heart, I see with my memories, I see with my imagination. Anyway, so pretty much that covers the first page. So there's going to be 4 parts, if I ought to sit in the center. It's going to be 4 parts to this. One's the introduction. We've already started that introduction. Then what is a Northern Gannet? I didn't know what a Northern Gannet was until I happened across one. And then the 3rd part is the early trips and discoveries prior to 2017. And last was actually the Shetland experiences. The description of what I get what I strive to get out of what I'm constantly doing in photography is really comes down to three things. One, I want to constantly be learning, and certainly photography, there is no end to learning. You just can't learn it all. Secondly, is I enjoy teaching. And third, most of my photography trips involve some sort of adventure. I'm not one, for example, to go to, let's say Paris and take a picture of the Eiffel Tower. I'd rather go somewhere where there are strong winds, like hurricane winds in Iceland, or go to Svalbard up in the Norway, in amongst the ice and all that. That tends to be the sort of things that I've done over the years. And this presentation really covers those three things. One, I had to learn about gannets. I got this question and it started to develop until I wanted to, I ended up trying to figure out how to do the underwater pictures. Then the next thing really was that whole adventure. I can tell you this taking the pictures of the gannets underwater was such a hoot. I can't tell you how much fun I had doing this. And then of course, this is a wonderful thing to help teach you perhaps something new, something you didn't know, that the library has given me the opportunity to do. And I, again, as I said, I really, really appreciate it an awful lot. So now we're back to, you won't be able to see me for a while. Well, I guess you see me, but because of the technical glitches, I have to look at the other screen. I can't look at the screen where my camera is. So you're probably getting a side view of my face. I'm sorry. I don't know.
So Ken, just to interrupt, they no longer see you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Then they won't know which is my good side, right? So what is this story about? Well, the story ultimately is about the picture you see on the right-hand side here. As exciting as taking surface pictures of the gannets, and we'll get into that in a little bit. My real quest here was to get the photographs such as those on the right. And the story is, how did I get there? This is my journey of how I got there. And from the point of view that I didn't even know I wanted to get there, the starting point, to how do you do it? So what is a Northern Gannet? And here's a nice pair. They're very, very sleek, very, very graceful. I mean, look at the beautiful color. That buff head is, I mean, absolutely beautiful. And wait till you see the pictures of them at sunrise, and how that jumps out at you. The smooth gradations coming from the neck down to the white body, and they have these black tips. Obviously, these are adults. The young ones don't quite look like this yet. They're very large, fast-flying seabird, but they can soar for hours and hours and hours. In North America, they summer in Quebec and Newfoundland, and then migrate in the wintertime to sort of the waters around North Carolina. They have a 6-foot wingspan. They weigh a little over 6 pounds. If you compare that to a Canadian goose will go 8 to 12 pounds, same sort of wingspan, but a totally different body type. Again, you see all the geese on the golf courses and whatever, and they're nowhere near as sleek as these guys are. Again, they are the largest seabird in the North Atlantic, and so this guy here is collecting nesting materials for his mate, and they feed on shoalfish and schools of shoalfish such as capelin, sardines, smelts, menhaden, fish like that. They begin their breeding around 4 years old. Here's a pair doing their breeding with different terms. Some people call it kissing. Anyway, they're monogamous and they stay together for years. They live in massive colonies. There are 6 in North America. There's 32 in Europe. Just to give you an idea of the populations of the 4 colonies that I visited, one at Bonaventure Island, which is up in the Gaspé Peninsula, the 24,000 pairs. Bird Rock, which is in Newfoundland, is 6,600 pairs. Noss, which is in Scotland's 13,000 pairs, and the Hermanus colony in Scotland is 30,000 pairs. Again, just to give you a little picture of them, here is the breeding colony from above. There's a viewing platform, and this is up in Quebec. And if you notice the uniform spacing between each one of the birds, number one, that makes it really efficient in the space that's available. Here, they're all up there. Most of the nests are on flat areas on top of the island. But that distance is really determined by the pecking distance of the birds. They're quite aggressive, and anyone gets anywhere near them and they just peck, peck, peck. If someone lands in the wrong spot or tries to walk through the area, you know, they're all pecking at them. So this distance is basically 2 bird pecks away. So, you know, one bird can reach so far, the other bird can reach so far, and when they can't reach each other, that's where the nests go. And any of you that have visited any colonies like this, you know, they stink. I mean, the amount of guano is just phenomenal. And I mean, it is quite smelly and loud, constant noise, constant going back and forth. I mean, it's just so cool. Here, let's see if I can do this. This might be where we get a little messed up. Let me see. Can you see my pencil, Robert, on this picture?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Okay, so they have a solitary egg, and you can see right here this brown egg underneath, and they raise 1 chick a year. And here's a picture of a day-old chick. Pretty homely, isn't he? They're just something else. But in about 10 to 14 days, they develop feathers all over them and get to look fluffy like this. Still homely, but at least they're covered in the fluffy feathers. So to give you an idea of my journey, my journey started as a happenstance, if you will, in Halibut Point, off Rockport. And this was just a happenstance. My wife and I were down there, and we were down there in the wintertime looking at the birds, and particularly they have the harlequin ducks down there, and I saw these gannets go by, and I'd never seen them before. They really caught my attention, and I thought they were really kind of cool. So, you know, from there we went, whoop, let's go back, messed that up. From there we went up to Bonaventure Island and Perce Rock Migratory Bird Sanctuary, it's called. It's up on the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec. And that I happened to get hints from some other of the Camera Club members. I think I might have mentioned, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but in North America, there are 6 colonies of gannets, while in Europe, there are 34 colonies. Then that led me a few years later, or a year or two later, went to Newfoundland to Bird Rock up in Cape St. Mary in Newfoundland. And I've got an interesting story when we get there in a minute about that. And finally then over to Hermanus in the Shetlands, and finally down to Noss Nature Reserve. That was also in the Shetlands. So I don't know if any of you have been up here to Perce in Quebec, but this is the rock, the famous Perce Rock. And down here on the background on the right-hand side, that's the nature reserve out there, which you have to take by boat. And geographically, to give you a little bit of an idea, there's the trip from Boston to Bonaventure up there in the Gaspé. Of course, now I'm living in Maine, so I didn't go quite that far. When we went up there, I left from our place here in Maine. But to get on the nature reserve, you have to take a boat. So you start in the town of Perce, and they take the boat, and initially it goes out here, and this is Purse Rock right here. So they take you around there to enjoy the rock, and then they take you around all the way around the island until you get to right here, which is where the wardens have their wharf. One of the good parts of taking this was boat trip was I got to scout the area because I really wanted to get out there at sunrise and to hire a boat to take me out at sunrise. So those of you who are photographers know that when you're trying to take sunrise pictures and early morning pictures, the time goes by fast. You don't have a lot of time to, you pretty much have to know where you're going. So I was able to go along there with a compass and whatever and say, okay, I want to be here at this time, I want to be there at that time. And a lot of those pictures you won't see in this particular show because we don't have enough time, basically. I did go to Bonaventure twice, and tell you the funny thing is you go out on this boat and you land, and the wardens sit there when you get there, and they give you a little talk about the rules and the regulations and whatever. And so the second time I went up there, I went all by myself, and it was basically there to take pictures of the young chicks and leave. So we went up there, and they had a sign that all the French speakers go to here and all the non-French speakers go there. And on the boat that went over, there were about 75 of us on the boat. I was the only non-French speaker on the whole boat. And again, for any of you who've been out to Gaspé, it's a bit of a pain in the neck to get to. So there's a lot of people that come from Montreal, from the French-speaking part of Canada to vacation here, and less so the people from other parts of the world, just because it's a little bit of a nuisance to get there. Again, here's a picture of the rock, and you can see the sunset. Oh, I'm sorry, sunrise going. So here we're looking to the east through it, and it was quite a beautiful morning. And here we're looking west. I think I forgot to mention, or we forgot to show it earlier in the other slide, but the Gaspé Peninsula is part of Quebec, okay, and it's part of the Eastern time zone, even though it's way, way, way east of Boston. Let me just quickly go back here. So if you look here, we're up here, you go straight down, okay, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia are Atlantic time zone. We're in the Eastern time zone, they're in the Eastern time zone because they're part of Quebec. Most of Quebec is over here. Well, the significance for me doing this was it was really, really, really early when we had to get up. Had to get up at 2:15 in the morning in order to get on the boat to get out there. It was 3:30 was civil twilight, so we were there the 20th or the 21st of June. I said, this is dumb planning to have to get up at that hour. But anyway, it was really beautiful. But to get out there, we needed to hire a boat, and we stayed at this this hotel. And these people at the hotel were, absolutely great. I think I mentioned we had to leave at 2:15, and the hotel owner we were having dinner there, and they said, what are you going to do for breakfast? And I said, I don't know, we'll get a energy bar or something like that. He said, oh, you can't do that. None of you are going to be out on the boat for half the day. You can't do that. You got to have breakfast, And he said, I'll have someone down here when you get up in order to make breakfast for you. I couldn't believe this. The hotel gets someone down there 2 o'clock in the morning to bake us a little breakfast. They were just so nice. But also I'd asked the hotel owner, where could I charter a boat or get someone to take me out? And he said his brother or brother-in-law had a lobster boat, and he'd make arrangements for him. So this wasn't the boat, but this is one just like it. So this is the sort of thing that we went out in order to take the pictures, and they were as cooperative as could be and helped us to get in the right positions, you know, and I'd say, we got to be over here, we got to be over there, we've got to do that. Here again, there's some early morning pictures of the birds, and I can tell you, I was overwhelmed. Just the number of birds, the amount of noise, all the constant movement, activity, the diving. I mean, it was beautiful. It was just beautiful, and again, they're so graceful. I've got a quote here that I've taken from the Cornell Ornithology Lab, and the quote is, "To see gannets hunting fish is one of North America's great wildlife spectacles. Flocks rain down upon the ocean, blizzard-like by the thousands, looking like a force of nature." And it is. One of the problems we had there was all these pictures had to be taken with a telephoto lens, because it was really impossible to get close to the birds. They're going after schools of fish, and they fly and they see the school of fish, and when they get close to the surface, they all dive, and the fish go back down somewhere, and then they might come up a half a mile away. So we see them starting to feed, and I talked to the boat captain and said, well, let's get over as close to him as we can, and then, you know, by the time we get close to them, the fish have moved somewhere else, and then we're swiveling our necks all around. Where are they going to come up next? And oh, there it is behind us. Let's move over there. And it was constant moving, but it was pretty much all telephoto type pictures. And again, as I said, you know, we were just constantly moving the boat to get in the proper position, and there was no way to predict where the fish were going to come up to the surface. Again, just absolutely beautiful. In this picture, I wanted to point out the position of the wings. So as they start to dive, they're like in this jet plane sort of a position, and that allows them, again, they can see the fish underwater. That allows them to change their trajectory as they need to. And then right before they hit the water, they go into this pencil-like shape. And we're going to the next slide. Actually, we'll go to the next slide. If they hit it just right, these splashes will go up 6 feet in the air. I mean, it again, I know I keep saying this, it's just so cool. Okay, after we went there, the next thing was to go to Newfoundland. And my wife and I were primarily going to Newfoundland to go to listen to the Celtic music and to go to this famous bird rock in Cape St. Mary's. And we're going to try something in here. I'm going to try and go to Google and show you something on Google Earth. But first of all, before I get there, I've got to tell you again, I'm sure because you're watching this, a lot of you people are travelers, and you know travelers screw ups, and sometimes the airlines do it and whatever. In this particular case, I reserved a car to go to St. John, and we got in, flew into the airport up here, and I got out and went up to the counter to one of the major, I don't know whether it was Avis or Hertz, one of the major companies. And they said, "No, we don't have you. We don't have reservations." I said, "What do you mean?" And so I pulled out my paperwork and I put it down in front of him, and there it is in the date and all that sort of stuff. He said, No. You've done St. John, which is in New Brunswick. We're St. John with an S, which is in Newfoundland. I said, "Oh God." So I said, just give me another card. And he said, "There are none." They have such a small season. They have a small fleet, and they're all out, and nothing's in to rent. And of course, we're going to be there for weeks. They go, "Now what do I do? You know, I mean, are we just going to sit in the bars and listen to Celtic music for a week?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I've got this. I got one that we just pulled out of service, and it was going back to the headquarters or wherever it was going to. Let me see if it's still here and hasn't left." Sure enough, it was there, and he was able to rent it to us. And I go, "Wow, okay, that saves us a little bit." Now, we're going to try this. And Robert, you need to tell me if we see what we're going to see. And comes up on the wrong screen, doesn't it? Let me see if I can do this. I want to do switch screens. Can I do switch screens? I'm going to go over here. And this may not be worth the time. If it doesn't happen quickly, we're just going to bypass this, but we'll see what happens. No, you've still got the one that says
So,
go to Google Earth.
Yeah, no. So can we have a bright white screen?
Bright white.
Blank white screen. It's like I'm going into the light, Ken.
Yeah. Oh, well, so much for that bright idea. Okay, we're back to where we want to be.
Yeah, we're back to your slides.
Okay, then we're not going to do that. We're not going to do my great idea. So, so a little bit, I'm going to keep it on the screen because we go to the Shetlands next. But I want to tell you a story about going to Newfoundland to Cape St. Mary. Bird Rock is this big pinnacle, and I can't remember how high it is, but say maybe 500 feet high. And so we walk out on this path from the visitor center, and it's fog, and you're following these little orange stakes to get out there. And when we get out there, it starts to lift a little bit, and it goes out in this narrow little V. And we get out to the tip, the narrow little V, which is the closest you can get to Bird Rock, is probably 6 feet wide. And the path going down there, as a safety measure, they have orange sticks that are about 8 inches high, put into the grass, and that's supposed to keep you from falling over the edge. And so my wife and I are walking out there, and and it's getting narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower, and get all the way out to the edge. And I'm thinking, you'd never find this in the United States. There'd always be a fence or something that wouldn't let you fall over, or there'd be, some sort of restriction so you didn't get yourself hurt. And here, all there is these silly little orange stakes. So we get out there. That's not interesting enough. And there's a warden out there, and the warden is talking to another photographer, and we sort of took turns going to the very tip. And there's another photographer. No, it wasn't a photographer. He's just a person with sort of an average middle of the road camera. And he said to him, "Do you see the whales down there?" And from where we were, the whales were little tiny things. And he said, "Look over the edge." And the guy started looking over the edge, and he said, "Would you like to take a picture of him?" The guy said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, well, put the strap around your neck and lean out on this rock." So he lies flat on the rock. He said, "Keep scooching out, and I'll hold your belt so you don't fall over." And I'm going, "You got to be kidding me. Where in the United States would you have a warden that would let you hang 500 feet over the ground and being dependent upon being held by his belt?" We're just astounded at the difference in cultures and in different areas. But anyway, too bad I couldn't show you the pictures of what it looked like. Getting on, we just have half an hour. Okay. Now we're getting into the Shetland experience, and this is going to be divided really into these 5 sections. One, overcoming the various challenges to do the whole thing. And secondly is, where the heck are the Shetland Islands, and figuring out where the colony sites are. Then figure out how to get around in Shetland, preparing for the shoot, and then the actual shoot. The challenges here, if we start right up here, is one, getting there. Secondly, we've got to find a guide. Then we've got to rent underwater photo equipment. We've got to arrange for a boat and a captain. We've got to get the bait. There are weather issues. We can't take pictures in storms. But to develop a technique for the photography, and then determining what the shots were that I wanted to do. then finding a guide. So again, this, let me go back a little bit. At some point before I had gone out there, I had seen a video of underwater Gannet diving underwater that was taken by scuba divers. And I really thought that was really, really cool. But I'm not a scuba diver. I mean, I was 40 years ago, but I had no interest in doing that. And I read this article, and it was by an ecology PhD who was living there. And he was, in this article, he mentioned that they were taking underwater pictures from on a boat. And it was a new technique that he was trying to develop. Well, I couldn't get any contact information online. I couldn't figure out where the heck he was. I just knew, that he was a diver and a PhD and lived in the Shetlands. So I called what the equivalent of the Chamber of Commerce was in Lerwick, and I knew his name, and they got back to me, and they told me who he was. So then I got in contact with him and had to convince him to take me along to do this. Most of his work at that point was really for commercial film companies, primarily professional film companies, primarily in France. So it was, I was able to go that time, and then 2 years later, I returned for more images as I found out more things we wanted to do as far as the photographs, and we'll get to all that again in a minute. Here you can see basically when Boston, then we went Boston to Edinburgh, and Edinburgh we went up to the Falklands. And this is to orient you where they are. Over here on the right you can see is Norway. Faroe Islands are over here on the left. This down on the bottom is Scotland mainland. Orkney Islands are between the Shetlands and the mainland Scotland. The Shetlands are a group of islands interconnected with ferries, and hold on a sec. The two colonies we went to, one was up here and the very, very northern part at Terminus Nature Preserve, and the other one here was in the Newfoundland. Down here, Sumburg is where the airport is, where you fly into. As you can see, it's about 70 miles long. But getting around is really, really dependent upon ferry schedule. There's a very modern ferry fleet that's really dependable, and so we'd go between islands on this, and a lot of times it was rushing like crazy in order to make whatever the ferry schedule was. And another interesting thing was that my guide, he had, he bought big bunches of tickets, to get it cheaper, but he had to buy a ticket for me. So the ticket collector came and he referred to me as an OAP, and then he took the ticket, and I just didn't say anything. And he said, I hope you don't mind me referring to you as an OAP. And I said, I don't know, what the heck's an OAP? And he said, old age pensioner, it's cheaper. I said, oh God. Anyway, here we're bringing one of the ferries into the dock, but what I'd like you to notice here is that the landscape in the background, you see that it's basically treeless and pretty flat, and it's sheep country. There's just lots of open area and lots and lots and lots of wind. And the sheep, as you get further away from Lerwick, which is the capital and essentially the only city, there are fewer and fewer fences, and so therefore, the sheep could be anywhere in the road as you're driving around. Here, this is we're getting to the entry to one of the ferries. In an off day, as I may have mentioned, we have weather issues, and on an off day when we couldn't go out, we went to Nos, and went across there in order to sort of scout it out and take pictures. Noss again is this island across the way here. Here is the Noop of Noss. Noop basically is a headland, and you can see it's 590 feet above the sea level, and you can see all those nesting birds up there. It's just tons and tons and tons of them. And again, looking here from the top, looking down, and it's a little scary getting that close to the edge to get a picture down there. What I can't figure is, why is this grass so short? You know, I mean, it would suggest if there were sheep somewhere on the island, but I didn't see them. Another picture of the colonies. You remember the picture I showed in Bonaventure where they were all up on the flat on the top of the islands? Well, here in the Shetlands, none are on the top. They're all on the cliffs. But there's constant swooping and moving of birds going back and forth. There's just constant motion. And in a still photograph, the only way I could find to illustrate that really was to take a long exposure that sort of shows their the paths as they're flying around. Very, very, very territorial when it comes to the nests. I mentioned before about the nests being and the flats being 2 pecking distance apart. Here's this one bird got too close to this other bird's nest, and she's driving them away. And they'll claim the nests well before they actually lay the egg. You know, there are good nesting places and bad. If you look here on this particular ledge with all these resting birds, this is probably 25, 30 feet above the water. But because of the nature of the storms there, they can't nest here because they'd be essentially washed away in a lot of the storms. They just beautiful bird, and just a close-up detail of this one. You can see all the birds flying. It's just constant motion. The bait, getting the bait. Let's see, how are we doing? We're at 45 minutes now, aren't we, Robert?
So Ken, we're doing fine. Yeah, 45 minutes. And if we go a little bit past an hour before we get to questions, it's not the end of the world.
Okay. Getting the bait. This is our guide here on the left. And what we did was we bought 200 kilos of frozen mackerel. And this mackerel was mackerel that was not fit for human consumption. They may have bruises on it or wounds and pulled out by the inspectors, probably go to fertilizer. So we'd buy them frozen and then had to thaw them out and put them in these buckets. One of the, this was the early stages of the this fellow taking these trips. Since then, he's perfected his techniques because he's got more demand for people going out there. But as you can see, this is in a residential neighborhood right in the center. And as he was running the water to thaw the fish out, you can see the water running down the stream. And guess what? The neighbors started complaining. So since then, they don't do it in their backyard anymore. But here he went from his backyard, had to carry it down, you know, this narrow, up and down this narrow lane into his truck, which is behind where I'm standing. A lot of manual labor. And here the fish all lined up on the back of the boat, really getting ready to begin. The first step, once you get out there, is that you have to attract the birds. So we're sort of motoring around slowly, throwing bait over to get them to start coming. Once you get a few to come, more and more and more come. Again, as I mentioned before, they go to where the schools are, and they determine that by bird. They see birds diving, and they know the school's in that location. Once you get them started, you know, they'll keep coming. Just look how beautiful they are. Just wonderful birds. This is the boat that I chartered. The captain is the guy in the front. My wife is there in the center, and then there are a couple of friends. Captain's job is to keep the boat where we want it all the time, and facing the right direction. Finally, after all that, getting to my goal here really was figuring out how to photograph the underwater gannets. So, as I mentioned before, we have to get the equipment. I don't have all this stuff because I don't do a lot of underwater photography, but I have to rent a camera and underwater housings, strobes, lights, triggering mechanisms. I had to figure out, there were 3 types of photographs that I wanted to take, again, over the 2-year period. This is called a half in, half out. Then there were some fully underwater in relatively shallow, and then fully underwater and relatively deep water. But these here, the half in, half out, there's focusing problems, as you can see, because obviously the camera looks at things a little bit differently. It's distorted underwater, and so you tend to get one or the other. Here they are in a relatively shallow underwater. I mean, speed. These guys are really going fast underwater, and I chose this photograph to try and represent the feeling of the speed that they get. I mean, when I'm taking the pictures, I'm moving the camera. You have to move it up and down and left and right, and I can see all the birds diving into the water, and the water's clear, so you can see them coming, and you're trying to get it to the right place so you can fire the camera at the right time. Sorry about that background noise. They really are controlling their diving. As you can see, they're using their wings and they're turning the corners. They've got a lot of control underwater. And we were using a wide angle lens. This is a 10mm lens. So they're very, very close. This guy at this point really is checking out the lens. He's probably 3 or 4 inches away from the lens when I take this picture. They grab a hold of fish and they're determined they're never going to give up. Never give up. You see, these guys ripped it apart. They weren't going to give up their half at all. Here's just entering the water. Notice the air bubble that he's bringing down with him all around him. And I'll show you another picture of that here in a little bit. But look at the eyes of these guys coming after the one that has the fish. I mean, don't they just look evil? I mentioned the air bubble. Look at the guy up here just entering the water and the air bubble around him. This one here, it makes me think of that the movie my grandchildren will watch, Finding Nemo, with the birds going mine, 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 mine. It's so exciting having them diving all around you. And I just said, you know, I'm getting wet. They're banging against my head. I mean, it was really, really wonderful. One of the unique characteristics of the gannets is they can go from the air to underwater, and their eyes can see instantaneously when they go from one to the other. There's no adjustment at all. if you look at the different wing positions of different birds in this photograph, they use the wing positions in order to control their speed and control the direction. But they also will use their feet to help propel them. I mentioned it's like a machine gun going off as they're diving, just going boom, 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 boom. You know, I mentioned it was so much fun. I'd sit there and I'd be taking pictures, you know, and I'm focusing underwater, but I can see out of my periphery, I can see what's going on as they're entering the water. And when they're really going crazy, I mean, I'd have to stop taking pictures. I just start laughing. It was so much fun watching them do that. Their speed of the dive can be incredible. They can do it up to 60 miles an hour. So after, as I said, we had 200 kilos of fish, and someone's charged with throwing them overboard, and so someone had to be constantly feeding the fish and had to go in the right spot in order to get the birds close enough to the camera where we wanted it, and the boat had to be kept in the right position. And I'm moving the camera around up and down and sideways and all that sort of stuff. But after about 2.5 hours, we ran out of fish. So they're looking for something. But here we are, we're on our way back to Lerwick, and these guys don't believe that we're out of fish. They're going to keep following us, saying, you know, when are you going to go throw some more fish out? And this is Lerwick as we're coming back into the harbor. And this is Lerwick Harbor. So we get back into the harbor. And there's a gray seal, and the gray seal wants some fish. Well, the captain had been giving them fish, and originally they throw them over the side, and this guy figured out if he came inside, he'd get some more. So he's coming up over the back end. But you see these two pipes up in the back end up here? They're put together and then put on a bracket to hold them, so it goes down about 6 feet below the boat. And the fish are dropped in the top so that the fish would come out at the bottom. What was happening was that the birds got so aggressive when you threw them in the water, they wouldn't be able to sink far enough. And so all the pictures we're getting, they might be 6 or 8 or 10 inches underwater, and we wanted them deeper. So the only way was to send them down this chute to get it in deeper water so the birds wouldn't come and get them before they had a chance to sink. And he finally got his fish. He was happy about that. And that's it. I'd like to thank all of you for your time, and thank Robert, thank the library. And this was, you know, for me, it was absolutely a fun experience, and I really enjoyed you taking the time to listen to me. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, no, you're welcome, Ken. So let's give Ken a big virtual round of applause, everyone. And we have time for questions. Larry would like to know, were you fully submerged in the water, and were you in a wetsuit or a dry suit?
Neither. I was sitting on the transom. So, you know, they had a couple steps that went off, and I'd sit there. And so the housing and the strobe lights were all on a long pole. So the pole was maybe 5 feet long, and it had a triggering mechanism on it. And then we had to get the right buoyancy on the housing and all that. So I was able to keep it at the level that I wanted. So I was not in the water.
Sam says, I apologize if I missed it, but how deep can the birds dive, or what is their average depth?
Well, I know they can dive to about 60 feet. And remembering that they're feeding on shoalfish that tend to be on close to the surface. So they don't have to go really deep like seals do and some of the other things, but about 60 feet.
An anonymous attendee asks, do both male and female birds hunt?
Yes. Yep. They take turns.
Yep. Gil would like to know, did you consider taking any video, or were you just concerned with photographs?
I was just concerned with photographs. I don't do a lot of video photography myself, and my challenge is, how can I show what I want to show in a still picture? Can I get across the idea of the movement, of the excitement, and that's sort of my challenge.
Jack says you did some super work, and he was very impressed with your photography. Sarah says marvelous. Versa says wonderful. Claire says fascinating. Peg says fascinating pictures, beautiful birds. Diane says thank you. Let's see here. Cheryl says amazing photos of such beautiful birds. Never knew about gannets. I love this presentation. She asks, do the birds have eyelids? Maybe it's a silly question, but their eyes seemed open in all the photos that you showed.
Yeah, most of these animals that do this have a third eyelid. It's a membrane that goes over that protects the cornea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Patricia says, nature is amazing, wonderful photos. Nancy says, absolutely wonderful presentation. Your photos are incredible. Shinwei says, thank you for the fun pictures. Great presentation. Lauren says, this was fun. I love your passion for these birds, and now I know why. Wonderfully engaging presentation. Thank you, Ken. Marion says, such an interesting presentation. I never knew about these beautiful birds. Colleen says, I didn't note the striking coloration of males. Are they colored similarly? So do the males and females look alike color-wise?
Exactly.
Yeah. Iris says, thank you lots for this excellent talk and for sharing your photographs. Gannets are so neat, and I learned a lot about them. Wendy would like to know, what type of camera did you use, Ken?
Well, this was a Nikon D3 was the camera that was put into the housing. The problem with the underwater housings are that it's made for a specific camera. So if you switch from a D3 to D4, then your multi-$1,000 housing is useless. And that's why someone that isn't doing it all the time, such as myself, underwater photography, it doesn't make sense to own it. It's better to rent it.
I think Judith is a fellow birder. She mentions the lines on their beaks reminded me of some totem poles in Alaska. There you go. And Gil was wondering, do the birds have similar behavior in winter?
Well, they lose. I don't know what their feeding is when they go down south, but what I do know is that pretty much during nesting and during when they're raising chicks, their energy requirements absolutely soar. So they really need a lot more at that particular time. The other thing is, I think that they lose some of their colorness, their beautiful color when they go south.
So folks, I think that I've gone through all questions and comments. And of course, as I say that, up comes a question. So this will be our final question. An anonymous attendee asks, did you see gulls or other birds competing for the same territory in the Shetlands?
Now, I'm going to answer in two ways. When we're out feeding them, throwing the mackerel over for them, yes, there were gulls around, but you know, the ratio was like 99 gannets to 1 gull. Now, with respect to the up on the ledges in when I was in Quebec, on the ledges, there were more guillemots, there were more other seabirds on the ledges than there were gannets. But when you got up on the flat where the colony was, it was all gannets. But there is mixing of other birds. But when you've got a large number of one, say the gannets, the dominant, whatever it is, the others are less of it.
Great.
That makes
All right,
sense.
well, folks, let's give Ken a big virtual round of applause. If you have any additional questions, his contact information is on the screen, as well as his website there, www.sleepydogphotography.com. Folks, look for an email from me tomorrow with a link to this recording, a link to a feedback survey, and information on some other upcoming nature programs and armchair travel programs that might be of interest to you. So let's give Ken another big round of applause. Thank you so much, Ken. You did a wonderful job. I know you are sort of new to presenting on Zoom with some big audiences. You did a great job. And want to thank Jack Holmes, who I know is on the line, for connecting us. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.